If I could have your attention. If I could have your attention, please. Yes, if you could. Go over here and then, yeah, you're right, 'cause that panel leaves. Yeah. It's perfect. All right. So we had, this is the front. See the no, he has another. Good afternoon. My name is Jay Hine. I direct the White House Office of Faith-Based and Community Initiatives, and we're a little worried about the volume. Can you hear me okay? Can you? Okay, good. We didn't think the microphones were working adequately, so we have the technicians on their way. You may need to indulge us there, but if you can hear me okay now, we'll start. We want to protect the time that we have together. It's precious. But I would like to welcome you to the White House. We're in very special territory. Some of you know this campus quite well. Others of you, perhaps this is the first time that you visited. Well, it's a special place and it's a special time to be here. When you walked in the front doors, you walked under a couple of flags, the American flag and the Holy See. As you know, the Pope is visiting this afternoon. He arrives Andrews Air Force Base in just a short while. The President and First Lady will be welcoming him. And tomorrow morning, there's a state arrival ceremony on the south lawn of the White House. And you've perhaps read the news accounts of the Pope's visit in Washington and New York this week. We're honored to have him. He's a defender of the faith, and he's a defender of the family. And so we're privileged to have him in our city and have his thought leadership as part of our inspiration for gathering here today. President Bush, as you know, and Mrs. Bush are great champions of the family, and they're delighted you're here. They're delighted because this is one of the highest issue priorities of this administration. In many respects, it's a signature on a couple of levels. One, President and First Lady understand full well the centrality of the family in the health of our nation. And when families are threatened, our nation's threatened. Our communities are less healthy. When we unite to strengthen families, our nation benefits. That's a core understanding of the persons of the President and the First Lady. But it's also central to this administration's governing agenda, which we'll be talking about today. So they're delighted you're here, and they understand that while great progress has been made, much work remains. And that's indeed the purpose of us being in this room at this time. And indeed the overall mission of the office that I'm privileged to lead. The Faith-Based and Community Initiative, in the President's words, is a determined attack on need. The President wanted to form this initiative to send a very clear signal that while government has a role in society, to be sure, it's a limited role, and that public servants represented in these chairs, community leaders and researchers and business leaders and others who care enough about a neighbor in need and care enough about the well-being of their communities are honored servants and public servants. And so our initiative is designed to bring strength and hopefully more vitality to the sector, to nonprofit organizations, faith-based and community groups. Historically, Americans have solved problems in private association because we care for our neighbor and because we associate, unlike any other nation on the planet, to organize freely, to point at problems and say it's unacceptable, that social need exists that we can do something about. Indeed, at home and abroad, we think that. So this determined attack on need, which is our office, makes us a servant of you. We're a servant of servants. We don't get a lot done in a human scale way in Washington, D.C. We pass laws, we spend money, we write policy. What we're trying to do is create a better environment so that you and your communities have more traction and have more support and energy to serve people well. So the true test of our initiative will be whether you have felt value in that which you do. The President has honored you with his words and his presence and his message, and those of us who work in policy space try to backfill that with the agencies and with your governors and others. But it's a directional emphasis that lands in community, real person on real person, and that's what we're all about. The welfare state was well intended, but it was transactional. It was large, and it was distant, and it was impersonal. and it got some stuff done. It got extreme poverty cared for in a manageable way during crisis, and there are other programs that operated, varying degrees of effectiveness that made a difference in people's lives. But it sure didn't love, and it sure didn't transform, and it didn't complete the work of compassion. Indeed, that's what happens in your individual lives. And so this initiative is trying to point in the opposite direction. How can we get closer to home? How can we get more personal and more interactive? And the President says government can't love, but people can. And so we're here to lift your arms up. And each month in this series, Compassion in Action Roundtable series, we try to do 3 things at once. This is our 16th session. We try to send a signal to the problems I was making reference to before that should be unacceptable in society. Did you know we had a session on human trafficking? Did you know there's 30 million slaves today all across the globe? Involuntary forced labor, sexual slavery, and others. It's the 3rd largest illicit crime on the planet, soon to take over guns and narcotics if you believe the trend lines. It's a terrible problem. We don't understand it enough, and it shouldn't be. We should claim that unacceptable. And then we should lift up the heroes that are changing laws, attempting to prosecute and save the victims. And there are faith-based community groups all over the globe that are doing that. Dropouts. There's 50% of minority children in American schools that drop out of high school before completion. In the knowledge economy, that's just a really bad idea. We can't afford that. That's just an unhealthy way for them, of course, to begin their adult lives. We have to claim that unacceptable, and then we have to thank those who are mentors and step in the lives of those children. 650,000 prisoners every year leave federal and state prison. 2/3 of them will be rearrested. Statistics are well established, unless a loving presence intervenes in the form of a mentor and a caring community. These are the kind of themes that we've brought up month after month here in the Compassion Action Roundtable series. And today, we're talking about a public policy issue and an issue space that isn't a silver bullet, but it's sure close. Because if we have healthy families and children grow up in 2-parent stable households, many of those problems get mitigated. We know that. This is the part where I'm preaching to the choir. This is your thought leadership. These are the words that you share and the actions that you lead. So we're here to learn about what government has done to try and strengthen you, trying to learn today from the community leaders that continue to innovate, from the philanthropists that are the venture capital to take good ideas and put them into practice, and to understand that innovation isn't one idea good or bad, or reform isn't one idea good or bad, but it's a bunch of ideas, and we need to understand what works and what doesn't, under what context, and be in the business of continual improvement. We understand that marriage is hard. I was at a think tank before I worked in government, and we did a research project on the state of marriage and statistics in Indiana and the trend lines, and as we released the report, I had a former lieutenant governor speak at the event, who cares a lot, likes Julie Baumgartner's model a lot, and wanted to see if we couldn't implement that model in Indianapolis, and he had just celebrated his 40th anniversary with his wife. And so he stood in front of the crowd as we were releasing this report, and he said, "I'm here to tell you we just had this wonderful party for our 40th wedding anniversary, and we celebrated 35 happy years of marriage." And it's so true. Marriage is just hard work when the best of circumstances among the healthiest of relationships. My parents, I'm so pleased to report, particularly given a cancer battle that my dad's had for the last couple of years, they just celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary last weekend. This is just a couple days ago, so I was able to delight in that with them. And they've given me 43 years that I've been alive of happiness and health. So they've struggled, and they've had hard times, of course. But because of their commitment to each other and to their children, I've been able to learn how to be a dad and to be a husband, and each of us have these stories. But it is hard work, and we're going to hear about that today as well. And it's an unfinished work, of course. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the next speaker and the president, but actually just want to give you one more kind of quick word about our surroundings, because it is such a privilege to welcome you here and to build a White House platform for you, for civil society leaders and community leaders, to be very clear in our message that our nation's in your debt because of what you do day to day. This historic building, this used to be the Department of Navy, War, and State when the White House was first built. Winston Churchill met in these rooms to plan World War II strategy. And the Pentagon was eventually built, and the State Department was built, and those officials moved out, and others moved in that serve the president now in national security and domestic policy. But there are few conversations that have been held in these hallways more important than the one we're going to have today. Because if we can do something to decrease or end divorce, if we're going to be that audacious and strengthen families for children, certainly our nation's going to be better off for that. I said President Bush believed in that, and he does, but he's also governed this way. He has created the Healthy Marriage Initiative that you'll hear about. He campaigned on it. He governed that way as a Texas governor. But he understands in many respects, particularly in Washington, D.C., people are policy. So he needed the right quarterback. He needed the right architect, if you will, to take a goal, an aspiration of somehow re-engineering government policy and implementing new government programs to strengthen the family. It wasn't some switch that we were going to turn on. It was going to be a careful, deliberative process, research-based, learning from the real innovators in community, and a design process that there was really one person uniquely prepared to fill, and that is our keynote speaker this morning. Many of you know him quite well. Wade Horn has been a dear friend of mine for over a decade, and someone we've learned so much from, but he's been a senior White House and government official in both Bush administrations as Assistant Secretary, the Department of Health and Human Services. He was our point person for this healthy marriage agenda. But he's also toiled in the neighborhood, and he's encountered many of you and your best practices. So when he informs policy at the presidential level and at the department level, he knows of which he speaks because he's learned from the true social entrepreneurs and from the researchers that we'll hear from in a short while. So Wade, I admire how you've done your job, and you have created a foundation within government that has reset the dial, that said marriage should be central to policy. Government should not hurt good, effective marriage programs, but indeed, maybe we can even build a stronger foundation so that these entrepreneurs can do more of what they do better. So I'm grateful for you, our friendship, and your leadership, and I'm so pleased to welcome you to the podium. Wade Horn.
Well, thank you, Jay, for those very generous words. Jay and I first met when he was a young kid and I was middle-aged in Wisconsin at the advent of welfare reform, working with then Governor Tommy Thompson, and who later would become my boss at HHS. The one thing that Jay didn't mention, many of you may know, but some of you may not, is I no longer am in government. I'm in the private sector. It's been an interesting adjustment. It's nice to see my bank account going this way instead of this way. But the most extraordinary adjustment has been the fact that for 6 years I had a driver. And so I went everywhere in Washington, D.C. I just didn't know where anything was because I'd get into my car and then magically I'd show up. So this is a true story. So now I get to take cabs. So I get off my office and I hail a cab and I say where I was going. And the cab looks at me and he says, "It's a block." So I told him I had a bad leg. Now, the other thing that Jay did not mention, but is I was the Assistant Secretary of Children and Families at HHS for 6 years. The one thing he did not mention that is perhaps even more important than that is that I am a child psychologist. And so throughout my entire career, everything I've done has been in service of a goal of improving things for children. And certainly not the only thing that one can do to improve things for kids, but two things that would be very helpful based upon the research literature is to ensure that more children are growing up with the love, commitment, and involvement of a responsible father, and that more children are growing up with their mom and a dad in a healthy married household. Now, these two statements, that children benefit from responsible fatherhood and healthy marriage, are based upon an extraordinary research literature that shows that just about on any measure you can imagine, children do better when they have the love and devotion of both their mom and their mom and their dad are in a healthy married relationship. For example, children who live in those circumstances have higher grades, higher college aspirations, better attendance records at school, half as likely to drop out, they're half as likely to have emotional behavioral problems, they're a third less likely to use illegal drugs, drink alcohol, or smoke tobacco. Boys are about half as likely to commit crime, leading to incarceration. Teenagers are less likely to engage in premarital sex or contract a venereal disease. Girls are less likely to become pregnant, experience an abortion, or bear children out of wedlock. I mean, just about any measure you can imagine. Kids who grow up within the context of a healthy married household do better. Now, this is not to suggest that children who grow up in single-parent households are doomed. As President Bush has said, single moms do amazing work in difficult circumstances, succeeding at a job far harder than most of us can imagine. And in fact, in most cases, even children in single-parent households do fine, but they do have an increased risk of poorer outcomes. And now that I'm in the private sector, and I have this need to be bipartisan, I will also quote Hillary Clinton, who wrote in her bestseller, It Takes a Village, this passage. She wrote, quote, "Every society requires a critical mass of families that fit the traditional ideal, both to meet the needs of most children and to serve as a model for other adults who are raising children in difficult settings." And then she goes on to conclude, quote, we are at risk of losing that critical mass today, unquote. So there really is a bipartisan consensus that we need to do something about ensuring that more children grow up in the healthiest context that they can. And so the question becomes, how do we go about recovering this critical mass of healthy two-parent households? Well, it might be surprising to some of you to hear from someone who spent 6 years in this administration and 4 years in the George Herbert Walker Bush administration, that is a government official for 10 years, to say that I am actually a culturalist at heart, who does not believe that government is going to, in fact, be the cure for this issue, at least not by itself. But what government can do, and what it is important that it does within its public policies, is to send signals to the broader culture about what we as a people value, what we as a people think is important. And when government is afraid to use a word, then it communicates a sense that somehow that word is somehow, there's something bad about it, maybe even unspeakable. And if the government is afraid to use a word, soon we lose the idea behind the word. And not too far after that, we lose the thing itself. And so when government is afraid to use the word marriage or to use the word fatherhood, it's not too long before we start to lose the idea, and not too far after that before we lose the thing itself. And so at its core, the Healthy Marriage Initiative was about changing the signals that government was sending to the broader culture to bring marriage back into the lexicon of public policy, and in so doing, increase the likelihood that more children will grow up with a love and devotion of both their mom and their dad in the context of a healthy marriage. Now, so at the very beginning of the Bush administration, he started proposing to Congress that we invest some money in this Healthy Marriage Initiative. It took Congress until 2005 to actually appropriate the money, but in 2005, the Congress appropriated $150 million annually, $50 million of which was dedicated to responsible fatherhood and $100 million to healthy marriage initiatives. On the Healthy Marriage Initiative side, we focused on 3 major priorities. The first is something we call Building Strong Families. And these are programs that are designed to intervene at the moment a child is born out of wedlock. Why? Because we know that at that moment, about 90% of the parents of that child born out of wedlock are involved in an exclusive romantic relationship with each other. And about 2/3 say that they want to get married, and about half are cohabiting. And yet we've been reluctant as a culture, and certainly as a government, to speak to the aspirations that those couples say they have for themselves. And when we neglect to intervene with those couples, what happens, we know through research, is that about 2 or 3 years later, most of them are no longer involved with each other and are into something else. So the core of this initiative, Building Strong Families, is to join with the aspiration that these couples have for marriage and to help them think through it, work through it, and develop the skills that are necessary for them to build and sustain a healthy marriage. The second initiative is supporting healthy marriages, which is about intervening with low-income couples who happen to be married. One of the great myths we have in our culture is that marriage has disappeared from low-income communities. It's not true. There's lots of marriage in low-income communities. They're particularly vulnerable because they experienced lots of other challenges, such as poverty and other kinds of social stressors. But there are marriages in low-income communities. But when we ignore that fact, what we fail to do is provide them with the support they need to sustain their marriages in healthy ways. And so the idea of that is to provide marriage education services to low-income couples who are already married. And then the final initiative, something called Community Healthy Marriage Initiatives. And here is based upon the idea that sort of a what-if question. What if whole communities got together? And a community could be as small as a neighborhood block and as large as a city or a county. What if a community got together and said, we're serious about doing something to support marriage in our community? What would they do? They probably wouldn't just open up one office and provide one service. They would probably do lots of things. They would probably work with young people and provide them with relationship education. They would work with couples who are thinking about getting married and providing them with premarital education. They would work with those who are already married to enrich their marriage. They would work with troubled marriages to help them reconcile their differences and discover ways to deal with the conflict that is there in more healthy ways. They would do lots of different things. So what if a community did lots of different things? Would it make a difference? And so through these three initiatives, we hope, and particularly through a research agenda, that we will find what seems to work and what does not. But if we think of healthy marriage initiatives as just another social program, I think we miss something. At its core, as I said earlier, the initiative is really about recovering what G.K. Chesterton, the famous British journalist, said, recovering a social ideal. And Chesterton claimed that it's imperative that when attacking any social problem, the ideal in this case being married two-parent families, that the social ideal not be lost. And so at the end of the day, it's not the amount of money government spends, but rather it's whether we as a people together have recaptured the social ideal of healthy marriages and responsible fatherhood. Now, we couldn't have done this if it weren't for the President's dedication to this issue. As Jay said, when the President came into office, no one had to explain to him that children do best when they are reared with both a loving mom and a loving dad, and the mom and dad are married and living within the context of a healthy marriage. And so what he wanted to do through this initiative was recapture the social ideal and ensure that more couples in particular have access to the kinds of things we know works, like marriage education. So in his 2006 State of the Union address, he said this. He said, quote, he was talking about the declines that we've been seeing in our culture about violent crime, welfare dependency, drug abuse, and teenage pregnancies, and he concluded by saying, quote, these gains are evidence of a quiet transformation, a revolution of conscience in which the rising generation is finding that a life of personal responsibility is a life of fulfillment. Wise policies such as welfare reform and drug education and support of abstinence and adoption have made a difference in the character of our country, end quote. Now, the president did not include the Healthy Marriage Initiative in that particular quote, but I'm sure he was thinking about it, because I believe that the president believes in his heart that he knows that part of what is making a difference in the character of our country are all of you who work every day to support men and women in the most important job they will ever do in their lives, which is to sustain their relationship and raise the next generation of citizens. So I am here humbled to be in front of so many old friends, people that I've known a long time. I am on to other things, but I am on the sidelines cheering all of your work. It is a great pleasure to have been associated with all of you, and I will continue to, I hope, deepen that association in new ways. Now what I'd like to do is invite the research panel up here. Maggie Gallagher and David Blankenhorn, Ron Haskins, and this professor from the University of Georgia who I've just met. They are going to talk about some of the recent research in this particular area. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Wade. That was a good idea, Jeff. Well deserved. Thank you, Wade. Our panel is going to talk about this report for a few minutes that was released this morning at the National Press Club. It's called The Taxpayer Cost of Divorce and Unwed Childbearing. And to try to frame it for you just a moment, here's how I see the relevance of this report, how it might help you in some of the work that we're all trying to do. If you're a marriage advocate in the year 2008 in the United States of America, there are three basic arguments in favor of marriage that you can make. One, you can argue on the basis of your religious faith and your religious tradition. You can say that our high rates of divorce and unwed childbearing are contrary to biblical values. They're a threat to our faith commitments and our religious traditions. And indeed, there have been many of you in this room and others outside who have eloquently made this case. Jeff Frey and the Marriage Commission, the Cathy family, others in this room have been stalwart proponents of this way of thinking about this foundation of marriage. You could also argue a little bit like Wade argued. You could argue from the basis of social costs. Those were those statistics he was reciting, because it turns out that in the past generation, a lot of wonderful scholars, some of whom are in this room and some of whom are not, have accumulated a mass of social science research about the human suffering involved when we have high rates of divorce and out-of-wedlock childbearing. The human toll. A number of you here do this. Linda Malone-Kalan, others have made important contributions to this way of arguing about the importance of marriage. The third way you can argue is on the basis of economics. You can say that in addition to the ethical and moral considerations, and in addition to the human suffering, you can say this is an expensive problem as well. This costs us a lot of money. This costs the taxpayers a lot of money. The problem is that we marriage advocates, I think, have been a bit tongue-tied on this issue, this third way of arguing. Why have we been tongue-tied? Because we didn't have evidence. We had suspicions. We had common sense to think that, gosh, this must be costing us all a lot of money, including at the level of taxes, but we did not have rigorous studies that gave us compelling empirical evidence. We did not have it. until today. Until today. And so what I want to say to you is now I believe that you have a new tool in your toolkit. You have a new, you're not only bilingual, you're trilingual. You can speak to this issue from the basis of morality and faith and the wonderful traditions that we are a part of. You can speak to this issue with your social science hat about the issues of suffering, particularly for children, that Wade and others have spoken of today. And now, particularly when you're dealing with business leaders who like these dollars and cents arguments, or when you're dealing with policymakers who are the custodians of our tax dollars and also like to think of this often in dollars and cents terms, you have an economic argument. So that's what we want to talk about for a minute. And to do that, we have some great people. We have Ben Scafferty, who is a principal investigator for the study. We have Ron Haskins from the Brookings Institution, and we have Maggie Gallagher for the Institute for Marriage and Public Policy. Maggie's group was a co-sponsoring organization for the report. Jeff Kemp's group, Families Northwest, was also a co-sponsoring organization. Chuck Stetson had the idea for this and put up some of the initial support. So Chuck is here, and his mother, Mrs. B.B. Stetson, are here. Glad, he really, this was his idea. So with gratitude for the scholarship and for the supports that made the scholarship possible, I want to thank you all and ask first Ben to give us the highlights of the report. You want to? Would you rather go up there? That's fine.
Thanks, David. When David Blankenhorn and Randy Hicks from the Georgia Family Council first called me.
Shoot, I forgot to say Randy. Thank you.
I wasn't going to say anything.
Yeah. Oh, shoot, and Marilyn's here. No, Randy Hicks was an important leader in all this. Thank you, Randy. Marilyn, I'm so sorry. There you go.
Well, when they first, I knew Randy from my work in Georgia, and when they first called me, David didn't know me from Adam, and so he was asking me questions like, what's your background? I studied public finance and labor economics, and pretty much all my research has been on public finance, education policy, and urban policy. And so he said, what do you know about the effects of marriage on different life outcomes? I said, well, I've read a little bit about this, and they're huge. He said, okay, and he said, what do you think about the taxpayer costs of divorce and unwed childbearing? I said, well, it isn't zero. And so I guess that was good enough for him.
We were off to a start.
Yeah, so they asked me to do this study. I won't get into the methodology too much because I don't have time. But first I just want to say, and we all know this, there have been huge changes in family structure in the United States in a very short period of time. In 1970, over 85% of American children lived with both their parents. Now it's down to 68%. That is a big, big change in a very short period of time. So how do I estimate the taxpayer cost of divorce and unwed childbearing? Essentially what I did was I went to the empirical literature that I thought was the best on two questions. One is, how does marriage affect poverty? And there's very good evidence on this, and I picked the most cautious estimates of how marriage affects poverty. Then I combine that with, what do we know about how poverty affects the use of government programs? And again, I picked the most cautious estimates of that. So I combine the two, the effect of marriage on poverty and the effect of marriage on the use of government programs, and I used the most cautious assumptions I could find and to generate my estimate of the taxpayer cost of family fragmentation. The estimate I came up with for federal, state, and local taxpayers combined is $112 billion that is annual recurring taxpayer costs of divorce and unwed childbearing. To put $112 billion into perspective, that's over $1 trillion in a decade. And again, those are, 112 billion is annual recurring costs. Now, again, I could go into the methodology and bore you for an hour, all right? I had a policy job for a short period of time, not unlike Ron Haskins or Wade Horn or Jay. And they'll say the same thing. When you're in a policy job, interest groups always pop studies in your face that have these huge numbers in them. And your eyes roll, and sometimes if you want to be a wiseacre. You pull out a napkin and you write up a little thing. Well, if your number's right, this has to be true, and you sort of make them look silly. I didn't want to be that guy, and I think if you look at my study carefully, you'll think my number's way too low. And let me give you 2 examples of why it's too low. The Atlanta Housing Authority, provides housing assistance in the metro Atlanta area. I asked them, what % of the people that receive housing assistance from you are in single-parent families? It's almost all of them, over 97%. But my study, the estimates I used to generate the taxpayer cost of divorce and unmet childbearing on housing assistance only attributes 31.7% of housing assistance costs to divorce and unmet childbearing. Second example, over 56% of jail inmates grew up in single-parent families most of the time. The estimate I used to generate taxpayer costs of the justice system suggests less than 9% of costs of the justice system are attributed to divorce and unwed childbearing. So again, I think those are 2 good examples that suggest my number is quite cautious and perhaps quite low. What do we do about it? I think we should think very carefully as a society about how we can reduce these taxpayer costs. And thank you for your time.
So I'd like to add just 4 very brief things to this discussion. The first thing is I want to congratulate Ben and David and Maggie for this fine report. I also want to tell you, no one has mentioned this yet, but they called me and we organized a meeting at Brookings, which is not right of center, to put it mildly. I'm not supposed to say that, but facts are facts. And so we invited several economists, in many cases world-famous economists, to look at the earlier draft of this report and to subject it to withering criticism. Which of course they did. We sat around there for, 2.5 hours, and Ben probably took about 20 pages of notes. And when we left, I was really convinced. I'm not an economist myself. I'm like, wait, I'm a psychologist, so we're sort of out of our field. But when I left that meeting, I was convinced that the economists felt that it was a worthy study. If anything, I think many of the people there, and this would be my general criticism of the report, even though I agree with the strategy, Ben didn't cover it quite as much as he does in the text and in other settings, that he really premised the effort on the idea of making an underestimate of anything. He said he didn't want to be that guy that someone pulled out a napkin and wrote down one little fact that blew the whole study. So I could write down 4 or 5 facts that right on the top of my mind now that show that his number, $112 billion, which is a big number, that number is too small. I think if we had perfect information, it would turn out the numbers much bigger. So that's the first thing. Congratulations on the report. You have achieved, maybe overachieved, your main goal of underestimating the true cost of money. And the second thing that I want to say is we've talked a lot here about scholarship. I personally have, from the scholarly world, that was my original, I did a PhD and I was a professor at North Carolina and Duke. I may be the only living person who can say I was at both Duke and University of North Carolina simultaneously. That was a lot of fun. It was during basketball season, which made it even more fun. So I watched for years as the scholarly world said, marriage is no problem. What? The kids, it's tough at first, yeah, but they recover and everything turns out just fine. So a couple of years ago, I had an opportunity to join the Princeton University. Bell Sawhill, my colleague at Brookings, and I. Bell was in the Clinton administration, I was in the Bush administration, so we made kind of an interesting team covering the spectrum. And we joined with Princeton. None of them were in the Bush administration, I can assure you of that. And we published a journal called The Future of Children. And one of the first volumes we did, Sarah McClanahan is the senior editor, and she's a huge expert in this area. And we found a whole passel of scholars who would say that marriage really is essential to children. And every paper in this volume, only one perhaps written by a person right of center, basically says if you want the strongest, healthiest children you can have a married couple family. That is the best rearing environment for children. And I can tell you for sure there's still a lot of people in the scholarly world that don't like that. I could tell you by the emails I got after this volume came out. So the scholarly world, I think, has really come to form a consensus that this is a vital issue to the future of the country. So now my third point is politics and this wonderful report and really everything else that we are doing, because we're about ready to face a huge barrier. I do not think that this is a bipartisan issue. I somewhat disagree with Wade. I've done that in the past, and I always turned out to be wrong. But on this occasion, I believe I'm right. It is not a bipartisan issue. There certainly are Democrats who will support marriage. But you watch in 2 years, in 2009 or 2010, when the issue of reauthorization, that $150 million comes up, $100 million for marriage and $50 million for fatherhood. When that happens, the rubber will be on the road. And I do not think that, especially if there's a Democratic president, which is at least 50-50 at this point, maybe more, so the Democrats control the House, the Senate, and the presidency, and they're going to vote on this $100 million. Now, I ask you, do you think they want to spend it on marriage? And money's going to be tight, they want to spend it on something else. That is the problem we're going to face, and I think this really is seed money. The movement won't die without it, but it certainly does promote the movement. It's vital to the movement. I think it's absolutely crucial, and we've got people all over the country who are singing out of the same hymnal, so we need to protect this money. And that is why I think the report is so important, because it gives us, it might give you a tool, but it gives us a weapon here in Washington to use and say, if you don't pass this legislation, you are taking a chance that you will continue to impose this $112 billion cost on the economy, on the government, and most of all on America's children. So these are the arguments that are really crucial. And one final point, even more crucial, are the people out in the countryside like you who will write letters and call and meet with your congressman if they have a town meeting, go and talk to them, especially if you're in a district with a Democrat, and emphasize to them of all the billions and billions and billions of dollars the government spent, this one little bit of money, $100 million, which doesn't even rate an asterisk in the federal budget, make sure that money continues to flow. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm going to try to be, can you hear me? Okay. I'm going to try to be really brief, because the important part of the presentation is to hear from the people who are doing the work on marriage, and I'm excited to hear about them, and also from some of the philanthropists who have already stepped in, like Kathy's, the McClellan Foundation, to fund some of this innovative social entrepreneurship that we're talking about. It's tax day. That's one reason why we're releasing the taxpayer costs of divorce. It's just serendipity that it's the arrival of Pope Benedict XVI, but I'll work that in too, and just give me a second. The bottom line, as some of you heard me say this morning at the press conference, doing nothing is very costly. The most important thing to me and to most of us who do this work is that it costs children a lot of suffering when parents don't get together, or when families fall apart. Some of those children are damaged for life at every point, and I speak to this, by the way, from the perspective of someone who was an unwed mother for 10 years and who watched my own son, highly privileged in many other ways, wrestle with the problem of how to deal with the fact that his father half of the people who made him didn't seem to love him, and at every phase in his life, even though he's a fine young man, this is what children whose parents don't offer them the gift of marriage have to do through no fault of their own. It's costly as young people get older and begin to look at making marriages themselves. How are they going to live their adult lives? The question the children ask is, can I trust my mother's and father's love? Do they love me? Can I trust it? As these children grow older, they ask the question in a different way, which is, can I trust the love of another human being for me? Can I trust myself to be a source of love for other human beings, for my husband or wife or for my children? These are really big questions. One of the things I love about Wade Horn, and Wade won't like me mentioning him first, but also President Bush, is that they recognized that doing nothing is costly, that what we Americans do when we recognize a problem is we don't just throw up our hands and say, oh, there's nothing we can do about it. If we don't know for sure what's work, we roll up our sleeves, we figure out some stuff, we try things, and then we do what so seldom happens in government, but did happen with the Bush Marriage Initiative. We invest in the kind of high-quality research that will help us shape the future programs. One of the things that we can look forward to in the next few years is a flood of high-quality research on what actually works in marriage. We're trying lots of new stuff, and we're also collecting the data that will allow us to shape best practices in the future. This is my second major point, which is that good research is extremely important. I have had the occasion now over the last few years in particular of going to many other countries, and I can tell you The social science research is basically the same in every country. It hasn't had the same impact in every country. And I really do believe that among my other heroes, Wade here, is David Blankenhorn, who at the Institute for American Values has been responsible for the kind of high-quality intellectual organizing that puts not advocacy research, but really high-quality research in a form that advocates can use in their work into the public square. So I'm really grateful for that. This is where I work in Pope Benedict here, because I'm pretty sure that Pope Benedict is going to say something about marriage. My institute just released a compendium of all his remarks on marriage since he became Pope. In less than 3 years, it's 111 times. And it's in that context, I think, he always connects marriage to the highest themes, the connection between faith and reason, the importance of not being afraid to trust the truth, and the various ways that God has given us towards truth. And one of the truths we have learned through both hard experience and in the high-quality social science research that people like David and Ron and Ben Scafidi now are doing is that the marriage involves the highest possible stakes. The question involved is whether we can, the dream of marriage won't die because it is the dream that love can be trusted. Whether you're a small child looking up to trust the love of a parent, or whether you're looking across that gulf between the sexes and wondering, is there some reason or purpose to these longings? Is there a way for them to be satisfied that can be trusted? The alternative, the final reason why this work is so important and so worth all that we do in our various spheres is that the alternative to rebuilding a healthier marriage culture is to give in to the forces of fear and despair, right? And to turn away from the most fundamental human longing for faith and love. And so I want to salute all of you in the front lines who are protecting children and rebuilding all of our faith in the possibility of lasting love. Thank you.
Jay, how we doing? Are we on time? Okay. One or two? Two questions before they all run off? Yes, sir.
If the Pope gives his 112th speech on marriage today, let's say
Ah, that's great. That's very good. That's not a question. That's just something to think about.
Can you repeat
If the Pope gives a speech in the next couple of days, it'll be his 112th, and it's $112 billion that the problem is costing us. So there's this interesting correlation here. Correlation, causation. Okay. One more comment or question before we go to the next panel. If not, thank you all, and on to the next part of today's program.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Joyce Thomas. I'm the Regional Administrator for ACF in Region 5 Chicago, and I have the awesome responsibility of moderating this next wonderful panel that's coming up. But before I do so, I do just want to say to David Blankenhorn and all of the folks that worked on behalf of this research, certainly providing this kind of research and getting it into the hands of the people at the local level who are engaging, working with coalitions, talking with administrators about implementing these services will be of great benefit. So for and on behalf of them, we thank you for your vision and your pioneering efforts. We thank you. You may give them a round of applause again. Okay, so you're in for a roller coaster ride. We've got 5 presenters, we've got 30 minutes, and each and every one of them could do a plenary session in and of themselves. And so we're just gonna rock and roll and move things along. You've got a wonderful group of presenters coming up who are actually doing this work at the local level, where it really, really, truly matters. Just by way of introduction, Joyce Thomas, one of the lead roles that I play is with the Faith-Based Office of Community Services. I serve as the lead regional administrator, working with that office and working with the regional offices. In addition to that, I serve as one of 4 co-leads on a very, very important initiative called the African American Healthy Marriage Initiative. In partnership with 4 executives from the Administration for Children and Families, Leon McCowan, who is in Region 6, Dallas, Carlos Williams, who is in the back there, Region 4, Atlanta, our boss, Diane Dawson, who is Director of Regional Operations. And we have led this initiative since basically 2002. We thank Dr. Wade Horn for allowing us the privilege and the opportunity to do that, because we know that marriage matters in all communities, and it matters in the African American community as well. And so we've seen some wonderful, wonderful results in that particular area there. Dr. Horn has already mentioned to you about the work that ACF has been doing, and it's really an awesome privilege to represent the work within ACF in about 1 minute, which is the amount of time I have to talk with you about it very quickly. We've been emphasizing marriage in the ACF programs. ACF programs serve the most vulnerable individuals of this nation, children, low-income children, and parents. So we've been emphasizing marriage in those programs. We've also been funding research, and you've heard about that. This particular research that's new will help us in delivering the messages, getting the services out that we've been talking about. We've been providing training for staff, and we have someone called the Marriage Czar. He's somewhere around here, Bill Coffin, who's been sort of leading the effort for us. Where's Bill? Where's Bill? I know he's here, right there. And we have people called healthy marriage specialists in our regional offices that work with communities, work with state agencies to help us move this work along. And we have these wonderful things called the Community Healthy Marriage Initiative demonstrations, which are organizations from around the country, many of them that are going on that we can't even keep track of them because the enthusiasm at the community level is just so great. So I won't take the time to tell you about them. We'll let some of the coalitions and the community healthy marriage representatives themselves tell you about the great work that's being done at the local level. So I'm going to ask my panel if they would please come forward. I'd like for Julie Baumgartner to come forward first. I'll introduce them as they get up. Melody Boone, please come forward. Carolyn Curtis, Francesca Adler-Bader, and Lisa Cummings. So I'm going to say a couple of really, really, really quick words about each one of the individuals, and then I'm going to turn things over to this very high-powered panel here to really talk about the work that's going on at the local level. Julie Baumgartner is first. She's president and executive director of First Things First. It is a one-of-a-kind grassroots organization dedicated to strengthening families in Chattanooga, Tennessee. She also currently serves as on the steering committee for the Marriage Commission, and many of you will hear a lot more about the Marriage Commission. But I just want to say, certainly to the Cathy family, that we really do appreciate your leadership, your work, and your obedience in doing the work that you do. We thank you. You have a wonderful legacy that not only has blessed you, but has blessed us and all of us that do this work. So, moderator prerogative, I thank you. Our next speaker, I'll introduce all of them. They'll have 5 minutes, and I'm gonna sit down. Our next speaker is Minister Melody Boone, who is Executive Administrator of the Indiana Healthy Marriage and Family Coalition. Minister Boone has trained to facilitate all 4 curricula offered by the coalition, which includes the 8 Habits of a Successful Marriage, How to Make Your Good Thing Better, Family, Lasting Love for, and Bridal Blessings. She's also a mentor to young women as they prepare for life after high school, dating, and entering the workforce. Carolyn Rich Curtis is founder and executive director of the Healthy Marriage Project, Greater Sacramento Region, the first Healthy Marriage Coalition in Northern California. We're going to hear from Carolyn. Then we're going to hear from Dr. Francesca Adler-Bader from Auburn University, Alabama Community Healthy Marriage Initiative. Dr. Adler-Bader is Associate Professor of Human Development and Family Studies at Auburn University and will talk with you about her wonderful work. And then rounding things out, we will hear from Lisa Cummings. Lisa is president and founder of Urban Strategies, LLC, a company focused on connecting resources and tools for nonprofit organizations. She's worked very closely with the African American and Latino faith communities. Please join me in welcoming our panel, and I'd like to ask Julie Baumgartner if she would start us off first.
Thank you. I'd like to talk to you today about 3 strategies that First Things First has used to permeate the community to build a community healthy marriage initiative. When we started in 1997, we realized that there were a lot of different sectors that we wanted to reach. And one of those was the business community. We realized that they had the people that we needed to reach from across the socioeconomic spectrum. And so we decided, instead of just going to businesses and saying, we need your money to be able to do the initiative that we're trying to do, we went to them and said, we want to build a partnership with you. We want to talk with you about the fact that you are hemorrhaging and may not even know it because you don't have a line item in your budget for family distress. But we know that research shows that it costs $300 million annually for stress-related issues to corporate America. And so we went in and we talked about these issues with them, and then we said, we've got resources. We've got classes and resources that people can access for free in our community, and we want to give them to you. We would like you to partner with us so that we can be able to do this work in the community. One example of that is our Father of the Year essay contest. I love this because we go out and we ask for sponsorship from the businesses, and we give them the opportunity to put their brand out there. But we also went back to them and said, you know what? We need readers for these essays. Would you mind reading 50 essays? So we went to CEOs and human resource directors and we asked them to read the essays. And I'll never forget when the CEO came back into me and handed the essays over and he goes, you did not tell me I was going to need a box of Kleenex to read these essays. But out of the mouths of babes, they were hearing the truth about how important fathers are and how much children need them in their homes. A second strategy is building a strong coalition. We decided from the beginning that we did not want to be out there reinventing the wheel. We wanted to come alongside organizations that were out there in the community doing the work. And you know, it's kind of interesting because this is a lot like marriage. You know, we're out there teaching classes where we're teaching people how to dance well together. But in reality, a lot of times we get out there with the agencies, and if they don't see 100% how we want to do things, then we walk away and we get in our own little silo and we do our own thing. Well, we decided we're staying at the table, and we're going to work hard on that 80% we agree on, and on the 20% we're just going to agree to disagree, but we're going to keep on keeping on together. Our third strategy has been, it has been such an honor and privilege to work with the government on this Healthy Marriage Demonstration Grant. That money has allowed us to take it up about 10 notches. You know, the problem is so big, but people don't realize that there's hope, that there are all kinds of resources out there that are available to them to give them the necessary skills that they need to be successful in marriage. And so what we've been able to do with this money is build strong marketing campaigns that have been foundational to put information out there in the hands of the people to tell them, you can do this. Teenagers, people preparing for marriage, people who are already married, people who are in significant distress, you can do this. And we've got the resources to help you. The coolest thing is that a lot of times when they come to our classes, they come for themselves. But when they leave, we often say to them, we recognize you are here for you, but you have just learned some new skills. You are the army. We are mobilizing you because there's not enough of us. So we're mobilizing you to go out into the community and pass this information on. And that has been an incredible, helpful tool to us, and I thank all of you that made that possible. Dr. Horn and all of the rest of you in this room who have made that possible. Thank you very much.
The Indiana Initiative has been formed to address the needs as we have been discussing here today. And our agency, I think, is one that has a uniqueness about it because it is a family. The origins of it is a unique thing because we were formed because we needed to address the needs. We were formed as a result of one of our strongest partners, which is Delta Sigma Theta sorority. One of their sorors was killed by her estranged husband. And we believe that it's not until people become angry enough that they will activate themselves and decide to address an issue and a concern. And that is where the inception of the Indiana Healthy Marriage and Family Coalition began. They band together in a coalition and they came together to address the needs of things going on. As a result of that, the sorors went to a sister who did research to see what are the needs, what needs to be addressed, what can we do about it, and then who can help us to get this done. With Ms. Joyce A. Thomas and Carlos Williams and Mr. Cohen's support, they pledged as a sorority to do whatever it takes. And with that pledge, they began to partner with the government agencies and with the faith-based community, with churches, with other organizations and agencies, because we know everyone is affected. When a healthy family does not thrive, it's not only the children. Those children grow up, they work in the jobs that we have, they work in government, they are active in church and in community. So that sickness goes on with them. So what we've decided to do is address that by bringing in, as we spoke of, the 4 classes. We come in and we teach 4 classes, which we just do repeatedly. What we have found is that, just as Mr. Hine mentioned earlier, we have couples who have sustained their marriages, but they're not healthy. After 50 years, we have men who come to us to say, where have you been all of our lives? One of the biggest questions that we're asked repeatedly is, how do we get men to participate in this? Women, we buy into it because we talk. We normally go to one another and we address the issues. But now with the programs that we have in place, men are stepping up in their agencies, in their businesses, in their coalitions. They're coming in, they're partnering with us. And when a man sees another man, then he welcomes the concept. So that's one of the things that's really been able to drive us and push us and help us to be successful. We also are a grassroots organization. We're one of the first African American lead coalitions in the United States to take on this challenge and be able to stay in for the longevity to see the results. We've partnered with several agencies. One of our main partners is the government. Because of the programs, what we do a lot of times is we go in and we keep reinventing the wheel, as you said. We just have this program and that program, but we figure if we partner together and put our resources together, we can be more effective. So we work with the government. We have the 1115 waiver, which is the state family formation within the Department of Children's Services, and we provide relationship building classes for them. We come in and we teach the classes, we offer them there, we partner with them, and we also support their efforts. So by us working together, the community is strengthened by us banding together and enhancing what each agency, what each organization, what each church has to offer. We also network with other communities. We have along with this initiative, the Fatherhood Initiative was birthed, and we partner with them. We do quite a bit of our work with them. And most likely what we do, one of the most important programs that we have found just by falling into this, we have a reentry prison program that is quite effective because most of these men and women that are in prison are returning to our communities. By us coming in and offering the classes to them, they go back and they can be productive citizens in the community. Thank you.
I want to tell you how honored I am to be here, and especially when I look out at the audience and realize how much all of you have contributed to what's been going on across the nation. And I particularly want to take a moment to thank Diane Soleil and Bill Coffin and Dennis Stoika and Bubba Cathy for his work with the Marriage Commission and the Compassion Capital Fund and ACF that makes all of this happen. And especially I want to thank my husband, who without him, I could not have done any of this. So now I'm here to tell you the story of the Sacramento Healthy Marriage Project. And in the year 2003, I went to the Smart Marriage Conference and I heard Wayne Horn speak, And I learned that communities across the United States were organizing and changing the divorce rate in their communities. And he said, go home and get ready because there's going to be some federal money available. And I looked around the room and I said, oh my goodness, everybody's ahead of me. I have really got to run hard and fast. So I went home and I started running hard and fast. So the first thing I did was I got a group of volunteers and we called 500 churches in Sacramento to find out how many churches or faith-based organizations were actually doing marriage education. I found out there were 3. Then it was to turn around and take a look at what was our divorce statistics. For every 100 marriages in Sacramento County, there were 82 divorces, and the year before that, there were more divorces than there were marriages. I live in a community of need. So then what I did was I organized our faith-based community, and I got people from the evangelical Christian group, mainstream Christians, liberal Christians, Catholics, Jews, and Muslims to all come together in the only organization in the entire county where all faith-based groups were working together to work on marriage issues. Within the first year and a half, we had 40 faith-based organizations participating and over 800 people served. Pretty amazing, at least in my mind. But that was enough to qualify me for a 50,000 CCF mini grant to start our organization. Hooray for you guys, because then we could really go to work. So what have we done in the last 2 years? And I want you to know this is with a $50,000 CCF grant and a $50,000 grant from the California Healthy Marriages Coalition. Not a lot of money, folks. So what have we done? One is we now have a full range of programs. We have programs for youth. We have programs for singles. We have enhancing programs. We have distressed relationship programs. We have programs in English and in Spanish. We have started to form a relationship in the government. We now have a great relationship with our state senator, who is now going to be the president pro tem of the state senate. We have an assemblyman. We have the board of supervisors. We have mayors, city council members. We've organized the Chamber of Commerce. We have 15 radio stations doing public service announcements. And now we're moving into various community-based organizations such as Head Start, the Department of Human Assistance, probation, marriage resource centers, schools, adult education, university, and homeless shelters. We now expect that we will have over 100 faith-based organizations participate in relationship education by the end of this year. We will have trained 200 leaders in marriage education and expect to serve 2,000 people. We've had Marriage Day at the ballpark. We've had a marriage summit. We've had Black Marriage Day. And this year we're going to sponsor one of the very first Dia de Matrimonios. We now have pulled together large organizations, and this is the remarkable thing that's happening. We have the California Mental Health Association joining us, the California Association of Marriage and Family Therapists, the California Head Start Association, the National Hispanic Evangelical Christian Association, and we're presenting papers at all of their major conferences. And we made a movie. Can you believe that? So, what I want to say to you is we are just beginning. Most of these are really small pilot projects, and I wanted to give you a picture of what this really was like. And this is what I want you to walk away with, is that I got my Rotary Club to do a sweetheart ball. And at that ball, they did a fundraiser for our organization. They got up and introduced each other. They introduced their spouses, which was very touching. But the third thing they did was they brought in my low-income, pregnant, unwed couples that had graduated from our program.
is indeed an honor for me to be standing up here when I look around and see so many of my colleagues who are doing just amazing work. I am very privileged to be representing the work of the Alabama Community Healthy Marriage Initiative. We are a state that has had one of the highest divorce rates in the last 65 years, and we have one of the lowest rankings for composite indicators of child well-being in the state. We are extremely motivated to work on family stability, to build strong, nurturing, stable homes for our children. I'm at Auburn University. We are the land-grant institution at Auburn. We have an engagement mission to be connected, to stand on the bridge between research and practice. And it is really my privilege to have that kind of job. We have a Center for Children, Youth, and Families, and we've been the coordinator for the last 4 years of the Marriage Initiative work. I wanted to share some of the innovations is what we were asked to talk about. The overall structure, we coordinate a consortium of the state agencies so that we keep them involved, our Department of Health, our Department of Human Resources, of course, our Department of Education, our Department of Child Abuse and Neglect Prevention. We keep them involved, informed, and the field staff informed. We have a growing network of marriage educators on the ground doing this work. And this last year, we ventured out into a new area for me, public awareness and marketing. And we do some of the traditional things like Julie talked about, radio and television. But I want to share one little innovation that a very creative staff member of mine had this idea that we would put our message up on the Jumbotron at the home football games, which is very culturally appropriate in Alabama. And we figured that the Saturday that Auburn plays that other team in Alabama, and it's broadcast on ESPN, that we have pretty much every pair of eyes in the state of Alabama looking at our message that healthy marriages matter for our children and for you, Alabama.
That's great. That's great.
So for about a $500 investment, we think we got about $1 million worth of free advertising, and I plan to count that as match on our grant, by the way. We have a number of effective partnerships. It's so hard, to really pinpoint what it is that we'd like to highlight. In 2006, we were a Compassion Capital Fund intermediary awardee, and we were able to give 20 sub-awards. One of those went to an organization in Montgomery, the 100 Black Men of Montgomery, a service organization of professionals who are business leaders, who are educators. My colleague and friend Ed Brown is here, the president of the 100, and they've just done a remarkable job. He has built an army of marriage educators. He goes in as the point person. He makes the arrangements. He's got the folks at the schools and the churches ready and waiting for the team to come in. The team comes in, those troops, and I apologize because he's a retired Air Force colonel and I'm using Army analogies here. In just the last 6 months, 500 participants have completed a marriage education program, and we are just really impressed. This summer, Ed is going to the national conference, and he will be proposing healthy marriage work as a national initiative for all of the chapters of the 100 Black Men across the country. We have a partnership in the schools I wanted to mention. We're in year 3 of delivering relationship education to youth. It has been an amazingly rewarding experience. Over 5,000 kids have participated. We use an iterative approach, meaning every year we ask them for feedback and we improve the curriculum every single year. We have documented, one of the resources I can bring to the table is a team of budding researchers. We are a research institution, and so we're documenting with a control sample the effects. And here's my not even 1 minute, I know, 30-second research report that we've documented a reduction in endorsement of faulty relationship beliefs, improvement in self-esteem, more realistic expectations in relationships, enhancement of conflict management skills, effective communication skills, greater understanding of the signs of unhealthy and abusive relationships, and a reduction in their current use of physical and verbal aggression in their relationships, a more positive attitude towards marriage, and a lowered endorsement of partner violence. We think these are very important findings. We've also instituted a booster session, and so we see across time that those students who also receive a booster 1 year later are showing sustained effects. Our health teachers are involved. We trained a whole room full of football and basketball coaches is actually who they were, who are also the health teachers, so dedicated to doing this and understand the link between healthy relationships and physical and mental well-being. We also have some very impressive, we think, results among our participants of adult education. One point I wanted to make here, because marriage education, we are not explicitly talking about parenting, and yet we have documented that after marriage education, improved co-parenting relationship, increase in the use of positive parenting strategies, a increase in parental involvement, and an increase in their sense of parental efficacy. This is spillover from healthier relationships to more positive parenting. Let me tell you how motivated we are to continue doing this work. And the numbers, though, I never want to forget the real faces. We were at one of the programs in Tuskegee, a Head Start, and there were about 18 moms and dads there, Ed. And one of them, after the first session, Mac, came up to me and he said, "Thank you all for doing this work. We have a 3-year-old, we just got married. My wife's had a really rough upbringing. I've seen a lot of bad stuff, and we want to do good by her. We've come here to learn. You've given us a place to learn." And then he said the most important thing, "And once we learn, we want to teach others." And I said, that is our hope.
Good afternoon. It's a privilege to be here. And before I get started, I do want to also give thanks to Wade Horn, Diane Dawson, Bill Coffin. There's a number of people without we would not be able to be here, because they fought hard for the things that we have been able to do. So I want to thank them. I also have the privilege of working with some colleagues that are here, Lorena Gonzalez from Houston, the Salgados from Miami, and Jose Villalobos from Telecu in Los Angeles. Work with a number of initiatives, Hispanic-focused initiatives around the country. I'm going to focus in on 3 of them. One is in Los Angeles, Telecu. We call it Futuro Now. Another one is called Family Bridges. That's in Chicago. And then the third one is in Phoenix, called Creciendo Unidos. We actually had a PowerPoint presentation, but technology didn't work, so you might need technology to look at the small graphs here. But I'll try to make it through quickly. Through these 3 sites, we have had a wonderful now 18 months. We are working with high school students, with single adults, with couples. We are Hispanic focused in these efforts, not exclusively, but that's the majority of the population that we're working with. In these 3 sites, we're working with 40 community-based organizations. Many of them are faith-based organizations, and many of them have very small budgets. In fact, I was in Chicago recently and asked the 20 partners that were there, how many of you have ever worked with public funding before? And 2 of them raised their hand. The rest of them were small organizations, probably budgets of about $300,000, $350,000, and but have been in the community, have been serving the community, have been trusted by their community. With these partners in the 3 cities, we have been able to train 800 leaders to become facilitators of marriage and family education programs in their communities. Wow, 2 minutes, wow. Okay. These leaders are lay leaders, they're volunteers. They have themselves completed anywhere from 20 to 32 hours of training. With them, we have served 8,000 individuals in our year 1. Year 2, we're 6 months into it by the end of next month, and we will have already hit 8,000, and in fact have depleted our resources 9 months into the program. So we're thrilled about the experience that we've had. What even is more thrilling is some of the demographic data that we've been able to pick up regarding these 8,000 folks. One is that their education level. only about 15% of the people that we have served have gone beyond high school. In fact, 40% of them have not completed high school, have been dropped out. And these 8,000 people that we've served, 64% of them come from families of 5 or larger. In fact, you'll see in the graph that we have about 15% that come from families of 7 to 10, which is huge. Of the 8,000 that we've served, 62% of them speak Spanish at home. And a side note, of the youth that participate in this, all of them prefer English at home, but they speak Spanish at home. About more than 50% of the individuals that participated are industrial workers. So we're looking at poorly educated, probably low income folks. About more than 72% of the high school students that we worked with were born here in the U.S., but 70% of the parents that we worked with were not born in the U.S. So we have a first generation that's foreign born, and then we have a second generation that we're working with that is here. In Chicago, where we were digging deeper with the data, 75% of them came from 7 zip codes in Chicago. And those of you that know Chicago, Logan Square, Humboldt Park, Bridgeport, New City, West Lawn, Chicago Lawn, these are neighborhoods that are high poverty, right, Joyce? Very needy. These are neighborhoods where the families are fragmented. So we're very pleased, more than the number, we're very pleased with where those numbers came from. We've learned several things through this year and a half. We've learned that preparing our organizations for this process has been very important. In fact, we were working with these organizations 3 years before they came on board. We also felt that important was that the organizations had a history of serving their community. They were from the community. They weren't going into a foreign area. They were going into the communities that they knew. And finally, as we look forward, we're looking hopefully to serve 10,000. We have the capacity to serve 10,000. We have waiting lists. We've actually had to end some of our programs because we cannot accommodate anymore. So we've got great opportunities as we look into the future. Thank you, Joyce.
Job well done, panel. Please give them a round of applause one more time. I apologize that we won't have enough time for questions and answers. The panel will be available after this convening here. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
All right. Good afternoon. My name is Randy Hicks. I'm the president of the Georgia Family Council. We're a nonprofit organization based in the Atlanta area. We work with leaders in various sectors of Georgia life, helping them figure out what they can do to strengthen marriages and families and promote a civil society. I want to join with many others in thanking Jay Hine and Yvette and others who put this event together, and then also thank the administration for deciding to tackle an issue that no other administration had ever tackled. So I'm grateful for that. Others would have thrown up their hands in surrender, which is the cynical response, I think, to an issue that is causing so much suffering and harm all around the country. So again, I'm grateful to this administration. I want to introduce this panel on philanthropy and community-driven initiatives. Bubba Cathy is, Bubba, why don't you come up? Bubba Cathy is a vice president, senior vice president at Chick-fil-A. You've heard the Cathy name thrown around a lot today. You're going to hear it thrown around a little bit more. He's also with the WinShape Foundation. Tom McCauley is with the McClellan Foundation out of Chattanooga. Has a great story to tell about their effort. If you want to read bios, by the way, it's in the program. That's probably the best thing to do at this point in order to save time. And then Chuck Stetson, who's with Essentials in Education, is also a managing director of a private equity firm in New York. I think the best news about today, I think, is that we have a growing and vibrant marriage movement, something that we've never had before in this country. And it's really been spurred on by this administration. But the way it's going to carry on is because of people at the community level who say our movement will be administration proof. It won't matter who's in the White House. We've got to make sure that this thing moves on. And so you've heard from leaders like those on the previous panel who have devoted so much of their life and passion and giftedness. They could be doing other things, believe me, to make more money. to do things that may be fancier, but they are engaged in this issue because nothing matters more to them. And they're the ones who are going to keep this movement rolling. However, their effort's going to be driven by people who see the value of investing in community-driven efforts. We can't always depend on having a friendly administration, as I said before. So these are the kinds of people who we need to have involved in a vibrant marriage movement that lasts not just for a few years, but quite frankly, for decades. And if we're successful in the end, we're going to see more kids, a higher percentage of kids being raised in homes with their married moms and dads, and healthy homes. So with that, I'm going to pose a first question, just kind of set it up, have each one come to the podium and for the first question, kind of make some preliminary comments. Each of these men and the organizations they represent invest in a variety of programs and ventures that they believe will measurably strengthen marriage and families, and therefore improve human well-being. They've invested in and even started many organizations doing that. We want to learn about why they invested, how they invested, and really what's driving their passion. We want to understand whether or not they apply the same principles to their investments to make money, to their investments in making a difference when it comes to marriage and family. So the opening question for all, and I'm going to ask Bubba to come up first, what are the kinds of programs and ventures you've invested in that have the potential for transforming the health of families and impacting communities? And why is marriage and family important to you right now? Bubba Cathy.
Thank you. I think on the question of why, that we've seen in our business a role modeling by my parents that you can be successful in the marketplace, but more importantly, you can be successful at home and in your marriage. And as I've seen folks come a part of our company, we're investing in those folks. As you know, all of our stores in the business side were closed on Sunday. And Dad established that back in May 1946, realizing there's something more important than just business or making the bottom line or the almighty dollar out there, and that's relationships. And so he saw in his wisdom, which is one of the best business decisions he said that he's ever made, was to close on Sunday. But it's a very profitable day in the restaurant business out there, but he used and saw the wisdom closing that, giving folks to be time with their families, giving folks time to be with their spouses, also having the opportunity to go and worship. And so, Dad, I want to thank you for that. It's fascinating to me when I read of other business entrepreneurs out there and successful businesses out there. You know, how many of them are married? How many of them have a strong family life? What's the correlation there? Dad's always, at our annual seminar, brings together business leaders that inspire us, not only in the business world, not only in the motivational world, but also with relationship wellness. One of the first speakers I think we had on that almost 30 years ago, Dr. Gary Smalley, that's here with us today. And Dad had the wisdom to realize, hey, to be successful in business, we want to bring the total person together, not just develop a good profit and loss statement at your store, but more importantly, be strong at home. And we've seen operators that with us for a long time are the ones that have a total wellness program that have been successful in all areas of their life. Now, as far as return on investment, we call that ROI in the business world, return on investment. What is your return on investment? If we invest $2 million out there in a restaurant, we expect that $2 million to come about in annual sales for that store. Well, when you get into philanthropy or in the foundation work, you don't have the same return like that as far as seeing it dollars and cents. So how do you see return on investment in what you do? We're just coming off taking 100 couples on a marriage retreat, very unique environment out on a sailing vessel that held about 100 marriage couples and had speakers and all. What is the return on investment there? We see that as being something that takes place transformationally in that marriage. What are they going to do to carry back to their home to make a difference in their marriage, to make themselves grow in that marriage and grow in relationships. So you don't measure it the same way for sure, but you're looking at almost something more important, dollar and cents, is the things that transform in their personal lives. So that's how we see it through WinShape, and I get to work with our company, our business, as well as our foundation, and I enjoy seeing a return on investment. Without the money, I'm reminded by my colleagues, without having a bottom line, you won't be able to have any money for ministry. So that keeps us motivated, the business, to make sure we got quality food out there, make sure we got service out there, second mile service. And my brother Dan, that's president of Chick-fil-A, is saying, and Dad's gotten us in this my pleasure attitude. So if a customer says thank you to us, we're supposed to say my pleasure. Can y'all say my pleasure? My pleasure. And Dad says, you can take that back in the home. If my wife Cindy asks me to take out the trash, I need to respond, my pleasure. That's right. If we ask our children to go clean up the room, they should respond, my pleasure. So that's something that we've learned in the business that we can take back into our marriages and into our homes. So thank you.
My remarks are primarily to funders and are those who influence funders. Don't wait on the federal government to fund your programs. You need to be involved in your community. And I would just want to tell you a little bit of how some of the thinking that took place in the McClellan Foundation that led to First Things First. In 1997, a couple of us had done a paper on what would our community look like if Jesus were mayor. And we covered such things as the workplace, arts and entertainment, family, government, recreation, and a number of other issues. And we gave that to Hugh McClellan, and he looked at it and prayed about it, and after a couple of days came back and said, you know, the family, we can make a difference in the family. And that's how this issue started getting. And then he also was quick to recognize that the first thing about families is marriage. So that's how the initial concepts came about. Hugh then started gathering a group of people together and discussing the issues and fleshing it out and seeing where it would go. And some of the issues that they came up with is that, one, it would focus on the family, but particularly on marriage. Two, that it would be designed for a change in culture. And you talk about our ROI, most philanthropy goes into making people feel good. It's either feeding the homeless or providing tents or cots, et cetera. But very little philanthropy goes into creating change. And so one of the things that Hugh does is he focuses on change. We also wanted to leverage all of the other organizations that were in town in this arena. So we wanted to be a paraclete, a cheerleader, an advocate for the issue. Going back and looking at the issues that really made First Things First work is Hugh brought together the board. It was top quality, hired leadership that was top quality. It created an organization that worked with many other organizations. It was a strongly grassroots effort in its funding, and then its excellent media campaign, and it also was adequately capitalized. And those are issues, I think, if you're going to get into the marriage arena, that are very important. But let me just encourage you, you can do it.
Thank you. I just want to thank particularly Jay. You've just done such a fine effort in bringing everyone together, and the group that I've worked with the Institute that did this fine report announced this morning. It's in all your packets. David Blankenhorn, Maggie Gallagher, David from the Institute for American Values, Maggie from the Institute for Marriage and Public Policy, and we had also the Georgia Family Council was involved, and the Families Northwest. And just all the panelists. It's just been such a great day here that I'm just kind of blown away. But I'd like to make a couple of comments very, very briefly. I think Rick Warren kind of hit a really interesting point when he spoke at Davos about a year ago, and some of the comments that he made at the on Meet the Press around the same time. And he said that, you know, everyone's sort of focused on business and they're focused on government, this partnership, and we're talking a little bit about that. But there's a third leg to the stool, and it's the faith-based community. So that's why I'm particularly taken by what Jay is really doing here, because he made 3 points. The local faith-based groups can really do an incredible amount of stuff that really neither business or government can take on. It can really tackle the Goliaths that are out there, and really for 3 reasons. And I'll just take the Christians for a moment. There are 2.2 billion Christians in the world. All right, you take all the people of India, you take all the people of China, and there are more Christians. We've got a tremendous amount of manpower. And houses of worship were global 200 years before we even thought of the word globalization. And the third point is that the local clergy are going to know more about that community than anyone else. They're going to be there when you're born, when you're growing up, when you're in the church or whatever other house of worship you're in. They're there when you're married, when your children are born, when you have family members that have died. They're going to know more than any. We have a terrific resource here, and there's a 3-legged stool, and we each can do it, and keeping in mind the way we are here in the United States with the First Amendment, it can all be done. I'm going to talk a little bit about business and my particular angle. I'm a venture capitalist, but I have a full-time job as a venture capitalist, but I think that it's important to engage into the community so that we can actually get stuff done. And I would submit, I've been studying William Wilberforce for a great amount of time, and William Wilberforce, it's a message of great hope. 10 people, they changed all of England, and it's an incredible story. So if the message of hope is a few people can do a lot of things. We did it more recently with the Bible Literacy Project. We had 6 people, $2 million, and in 2 years we changed the nation's thinking. I think we're going to do the same thing with marriage today, and I'm really excited for all of this because I think it's clearly the doable type of thing, and it's getting people together in this kind of situation. I apply 3 basic principles. When I look at anything, I don't care whether it's for profit or non-for-profit, but there are 3 things you have to have. You have to have a compelling issue. We have a compelling issue here. Number 2 is you have to have an outstanding management team. I don't go with anything that's not an outstanding management team. Number 3 is you have to have measurable results. And I'd say in measurable results, you often don't have that in the nonprofit world. It's something we have to think about. It's something we have to put in place. I think it's a really critical thing. When I invest in the nonprofit world, I apply the same things that I do in business. Thank you.
We have just a few minutes left, but I want Bubba Cathy to come up and talk about 2 initiatives that he's involved in, that he has really spurred on. One is the Marriage Commission. You've heard references to it, and also the Marriage and Family Foundation, both of which I think kind of give you a picture as to possibilities. So if you can just take a couple minutes to tell us about those.
In the restaurant industry, we have a National Restaurant Association where we bring all the folks together once a year to talk about food quality, service, cleanliness. We learn from other folks, even our competitors out there, on how we can better serve the general public, and the whole standard of our restaurant industry goes up. So I thought, what could we do about bringing folks together with marriage ministries and all? And so we started bringing a collaboration of folks together, and we started this several years ago. And I thought, first of all, we would just do it just to encourage these folks in the marriage ministry. But once we started bringing them together, we realized, hey, there's some other ideas that are coming out of this that could help strengthen these different marriage ministries out there and encourage them about the work that they're about. And so the Marriage Commission was born out of this, not only in the marriage ministry segment, but also in the segment of churches and businesses and media, government, and all that have come together and tried to make a difference in their community. And so that's been great about that. And then out of that, I need funding for that. And so we've developed a Marriage and Family Foundation. And we are proud to have that going on. We have some wonderful folks involved in that. Tim Cook, another businessman out of Orlando, Florida, has the Regal Boat Company, so involved in that. And Gary Smalley is involved in that. And we have some wonderful folks that are involved in helping us bring that about. So I want to thank again Mom and Dad. There's 60 years of marriage that's coming up this fall. My dad has said there's no perfect people, therefore there's no perfect marriages. out there. And we know, just like our bodies, it's going to take maintenance, like our cars are going to take maintenance, our homes are going to take maintenance, and we need to work on our marriages as well. And y'all have proven out that the benefits far outweigh the burdens that go along with that. So thank you, Dad. And Dad's role model that for me in our 30 years of marriage with my beautiful wife, Cindy, that's here, my brother Dan, is president of our country and company. And sorry that.
Whoops.
Excuse that. Is that going to the White House? It's not going to the Oval Office, I hope. And then my sister Trudy, that's got 30 years of marriage as well. So, Dad, thank you and Mom for role modeling healthy marriages, especially out there in the marketplace. God bless you.
That concludes the panel. If you have any questions or comments for them afterwards, please do walk up to them. They're very gracious with their time. So thank you very much, and I didn't realize Dan was quite that ambitious. So that's interesting. Oh, you have a couple questions? Okay. Any questions for this panel?
Yeah, may I have a half a minute? Half a minute.
Can I take this question and then?
All right.
We have one question back there. Janice?
With all the issues that are so pressing in the nation, why did you choose marriage to focus on?
Good question.
Go ahead.
Well, Dad's been teaching Sunday school for about 50 years to 13-year-old boys. He takes an inventory with these kids on what's the most pressing thing that if they could change things at home, what would they change? And the number one thing that says, stop the arguing between my mom and my dad. So Cindy and I have felt led to go upstream from that. And I used to teach 14-year-old boys. And so I realized that I was called upon, Cindy and I were called upon to teach engaged and newlyweds, realizing that in our churches, that's when you lose folks when they get engaged or they get married. And so we've gone upstream from that, and we said try to tackle that problem at the beginning there. And a strong, healthy faith marriage eliminates a lot of problems out there in our society, makes better sense business-wise and for our economy, less burden on the taxpayers. There's a lot of benefits. So good question. Thank you.
Let me answer that real quickly. As we see it from our biblical understanding, God created three institutions: the family, the church, and the state. All granting, all activities should inform one or the other, or maybe all.
Mr. Cathy, you may have 1 minute. Absolutely. I yield the floor.
Everything here has been on a partisan tone, but I want to express our frustration being in foster care. We've been doing this more than 20 years, and we have 12 homes in Georgia, Alabama, and Tennessee, and one in Brazil. But the problem we have, and as I told the president today, we'd have more if it wasn't for the federal government and wasn't for the state government. We used to have 88 children from DFACS, Department of Family Children Services. Today, we only have 5, simply because of the fact that we've been accused, you just want the good kids. I said, well, that's right. You got agency for those in drugs and alcohol and sex, but no program where it attracts individuals that never have had any problem, just victim of circumstances. And those are the children that we try to select. And we send them right on through high school. With 1 year, 2 years ago, we had 17 of our graduates went on to college. Only one did not go to college. And we help them in a career planning and a future mate who's going to be, which motivates me. There are such kids out there, but we're prohibited from doing that, even though we spend $3 million a year just on child care. And yet we have 2 homes that's closed simply because we don't have any children put in them. And the people that we select, the parents, is responsible for the quality of that home. And we tell them it's not a job, it's a calling. If you don't feel called to do this, you'll soon get burnt out when you're somebody else's children for 24 hours a day. So we've been highly successful in them. We pay them both a salary, full-time, paid parents. We furnish 2 automobiles. They all homes that's equal or better than I live in, my wife live in, And, but yet, it's distressing to see empty beds there when they're pleading for foster care. But now they're putting them in homes, only 3 to a home, doesn't particularly matter if it's work or not. And it's very frustrating. I thought I would set an example that other business people would do likewise. But I discourage this because you don't know what's ahead of what you're asking for. But it gets worse as time goes on. And I would like to see other business people duplicate what we're doing and what it might cost, what they might expect in return. But we're denied that privileges. And I can't reason to anyone that would be willing to furnish the money, the resources. We place, I think our smallest home is on 20 acres of land, and we feel like we don't put them next door to 7-Eleven store, things like that, and we get them to church, and we try to spend as much time as I can. Seems like the older I get, the more I have to do. I used to take them, spend the weekend with me, time to time, but I've been hesitant of doing that now. But I just want you to know it's a responsibility, and the government has sent an ultimatum out: put those children back in the homes they came from, or put them up for adoption. And that's dangerous, very dangerous on the part. So I would hope that it be, we're not ever encouraging like the agencies we work there with their enemy. They find every reason not to put children with us. So I just want to know my situation. Apologize for the negative report here I'm giving, but there is hope. The roof's off it is the parents and the children that don't have any problems just have parent problems. Thank you.
Can I borrow you for just another couple of minutes, or do you need to step out? Okay. Well, True, let me say first that that's not a negative word. That's a realistic word. Why we're here today is to chart some of the progress that's been made, but we got a lot of work to do, and these are not easy solutions all the time. And what's been on display today is a couple of things I wanted to note. There's a multi-sector strategy is a pretty popular term in the literature. What you saw today is a multi-sector strategy working itself out. When you take government and you take business and you take civil society and you try to leverage the strengths of each of the institutions inherent to those sectors, you get new conversations. And so what you're able to reveal to us is some stories about life transformation. I'm sorry Kayla's not here. She just had to step out. One of the foster children that's been so blessed by the ministry and the work that you've done. She's just a remarkable success story, and there's so many like her. But then there are issues that you're struggling with. Well, we're here to talk about that, to figure it out, and to think through together and help give you more voice. And Wade Horn, he sits here for the whole time when everyone's stroking him, but now when there's a policy challenge, where is he? So next time you see him. But this is part of the process, is we want new voices. There's going to be a change in administration. Good word about making this movement administration-proof, Randy, I think is a good, strong word, because it's beyond government. You know, we're talking about government strategies to add value to the movement. I just want to recognize a few people and talk about, too, how far we've come. Jim Daly with Focus on the Family, and Dr. Dobson, your colleague, Gary Smaller, who's been mentioned, and so many other voices that have worked in your sphere of influence. 15, 20 years ago, this conversation was a little different, wasn't it? And there were fewer voices in the chorus, wasn't. Today's frustration, Family Research Council, today's frustration is that we just didn't have enough time. Each speaker was getting good and good and good, and we want to hear more, and we were just ushering them off to get the next speaker on board, because we were going through all the sectors engaged, from innovative philanthropy to cutting-edge research, and the practitioners this is just a sampling. You know, I wanted so much of your own story, and think about the knowledge management that we need to think through with the complexity now of how many different innovations are moving. Wade Horn, when he was the early on president of National Fatherhood Initiative, told me that when he held his first convention, there were 4 people. 4. And he was giving his speech, and he thought, just like a good pastor would do, he thought, I got 4 people, I'm going to give them all 50 pounds of this speech. And so he was giving his keynote address this way. About 10 minutes into his remarks, 2 of the 4 kind of raised their hands sheepishly and said, we're in the wrong room. So it's like 50% of his deal right there. That wasn't that long ago. And today we didn't have enough time for today's conversation, and we're just revealing the complexity of the conversation that today hopefully is just a catalyst for. So I want to thank you for the real word, actually, that you shared, but I also want to honor you as we close. And you can say another word if you want.
Well, I'd like to urge y'all, if you know a situation that kids don't have to go through the courts, that you like to consider us as a candidate for them, we'd be glad to do that. Children that parents have died, don't have grandparents to go to, and other, I know, keeping their own families together. But there are some situations where we might be the solution to your problem, where you don't have to go through the courts.
That's right.
That's what we're doing right now, because we've lost our contact with DFACS, Department of Family and Children Services. And but we are, as word gets out, that we take children up to 13. 5 to 13 is what we're licensed for. And we would invite your interest if you run across situations dealing with children. There's no need to send them through DFACS or agency, that you can place them with us. And I'll do everything for them as I do for my grandchildren.
Yes, you do. And the president... Some of you heard this earlier today, but the President of the United States met with Truett and Jeanette and the family, Bubba and Cindy, and friends, and put the pin on his lapel, the President's Voluntary Service Award, to recognize that you're in the fight on foster care, that you're working with the system, working around the system, but you're loving on kids just as they were your own. And that's part of your journey. You've given scholarships, $18 million or so of scholarships to other disadvantaged children, and you've taught Sunday school for 50 years. 13-year-olds, I have a 13-year-old boy. I'm glad he's 13 1 year and moving on, and you keep going back to these 13-year-olds. And then, as has been said so eloquently by Bubba and others, your life of service. It's a lifetime service award is what we call it, and your life of service together has just been such a beautiful testament that it's a nice way to tie a bow around this conversation today, to thank you for your service. And for each of the speakers, I want to thank you for being disciplined to keep your time, even though I was one of the ones wishing you'd break the rules because we just had so much good material to cover. It just maybe means today's session needs to be repeated in both public and private settings. And so I thank you all for your time, for your service at home, and I wish you well. Have a good day.
All right, I'll take one. You know right where to go. Look at